Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our earnings call for the second quarter. We'll just give it a few minutes so people can join, and we'll be starting shortly. We will also have simultaneous translation available if you'd rather. You can just select the interpretation button, which is right there below in Zoom. So I would like to introduce myself as we begin the presentation for our results. I'm Sergio Hibas. I'm the CEO at Irani, and we have our full management team. Mojivan Kagni is our CFO, and Hiki Zugerman is our director for the paper and forestry business. Fabiano Oliveira, he's our director for people, strategy, and management, and Lindomar, our packaging director. So we have our full management, and we'll have a quick presentation of our earnings this quarter. And soon after, we'll open up for Q&A and any points that you may have. So feel free to add your questions to chat or Q&A. And by the end of my presentation, we'll have a full Q&A going deeper into the topics of interest. So as we get into our presentation for our earnings, we did have performance that was very positive when we look at the last 12 months. We ended with a net revenue of 1,683,000 reais. Sorry, 28.3% compared to the 12 previous months. Our EBITDA and LTM is 555 million, 64.7% compared to the last 12 months. And our leverage was at 1.11 times. It went up a bit more because of when compared to the previous quarter, due to the investments in the Gaia platform that took on important speed. And naturally, the leverage tends to go up in this quarter and in the next ones as well because of investments in the Gaia platform. Return on invested capital was our biggest return on invested capital, 25.5%, 0.1 higher than the ROIC we had in the previous quarter. This is a ROIC that is extremely high for industry levels worldwide. So this demonstrates the high returns on invested capital that the company has been able to deliver to its investors. So a net revenue of 357 million. This is 94.5% compared to the 12 previous months. The cost of the debt is 13.6% per year, already impacted by the peak in the interest rates in the last month, and the investments in the Gaia platform that have already completed 515 million till July 30th. So when we look at the quarter, we had a net revenue of 6.4% higher than the first quarter, and an EBITDA of 144 million, 21.6% compared to the second quarter last year, a profit of 84 million, 25% higher than the second quarter of 2021. And the investments we had in this quarter in the Gaia platform, representing 110 million, 448,000. So when we look at the revenue compared to the previous quarter, there was an evolution of 5.1%, and compared to the EBITDA, there was a 6% evolution, and net income was 24.6% lower than last quarter because of the fact that in the first quarter we had the recognition of some tax credits representing a total amount of 11 million. And in this quarter also, we had a provision for stake in management of 11 million as well. So in the same store basis, we'd have a difference of 22 million, which would add up to a net income that's very similar, actually even higher than what we had in the first quarter if you were to just consider these two effects. When we look at the packaging market for corrugated cardboard packaging and sustainable packaging, we notice that there's a reduction of the demand of corrugated cardboard. When we look at the quarterly vision, there's a drop in the market of 2.2%, but an evolution of 5.8% compared to the first quarter of 2022. When we look at the month of June specifically, this was the first month where we had an evolution in the shipping and transportation in the same period of the last year. So this demonstrates a market that's really busy in the end of this second quarter and beginning of the third quarter. And this makes us have very positive expectations when it comes to the demand for corrugated cardboard throughout the second semester this year. When we look at this in square meters, 1.3 below the second quarter, but 5.4% above the first quarter of 2022. So especially in Irani, we also had an important evolution in our volumes, an annual vision with a drop of 1.4, with a very strong profitability strategy we worked on in the first and beginning of the second quarter, and also an evolution of about 6%, considering this process with a stronger demand and the utilization of the additional capacity in the units in the Santa Catarina unit for the Gaia 2 project that we've already started working on, to be able to have the evolution of the volumes to be able to fill in the capacity of that unit due to the investments we perform. When we take a look at this in square meters, we have 4% drop and 14% compared to the second quarter. When we look at the average prices for corrugated cardboard, we had an increase of 1% compared to the second quarter last year, and we also had a drop of 4.3% in regards to the first quarter of 2022. This drop is mainly due to some factors. There was a substantial drop in the prices of the scraps, and some products have a very strong correlation with the scraps, especially for the sheets that represent about 20% of our total volume. So there's a natural drop in the prices of the sheets when you have a drop in scraps. But there's also some new accounts coming in due to the additional volume in Santa Catarina, which impacts the average price. It doesn't mean a drop in profitability, but it does mean that we are bringing in some volumes that could even be more productive in our factory and have better margins, but with average prices that are a little lower than the average we have in our overall portfolio. So this ends up somehow harming the average price when you look at the consolidated vision. But these are phenomena will coexist with until we fill out the full capacity in Santa Catarina. But our expectations are that in the second semester we'll have very positive results, and with the offsetting of prices with the inflation in the year that are already going to be disclosed in the overall market. So when you think about the prices in square meters, the increase is a little bit higher and the drop is a little lower compared to the first quarter of 2022. When we look at papers in the overall market for packaging that we sell in the market, we sell 6.8% more than what we had in the second quarter of 2021 and 3% more than what we sold in the first quarter. And what I'd like to highlight in papers for flexible packaging for bags, we went from 24 to 25,000 tons, and this represented 67% of the market supply. And we have a sales policy of low volumes, and the high seasonality periods we have very small sales or sometimes not even sell. And as we increase the volumes in Santa Catarina, we should be transferring all of this paper to our conversion units. When we take a look at the average prices of these papers, 25,336 tons, we had an evolution that was very significant, 14.6% from an annual perspective. And these papers mostly are virgin fibers, and an evolution of 1.3% compared to the first quarter of 2022. We went with an increase of prices of these papers by the end of the second quarter. And we should consolidate this increase in the paper segment till the month of August this year. And the average prices for this paper of 7,380 had a drop because basically what we sell is the pulp, and the comparison with the scraps is very strong. And this, of course, was impacted by the drop in the scraps prices at the moment, the prices are already under recovery as the scraps have also had a bit of an increase. And so when we take a look at the scrap prices in the market, there was a drop of 59% from an annual perspective and 9.3% from a quarterly perspective. And with Irani, it was a little less, 56.5% and 8.1%. This is due to the freights that impact this. When we look at the FOB prices and the sea prices, it's dropped 53.5 and 12.5. So there's a bigger amount of freight costs. And in Irani medium-sized, we had a drop of 57.5 and 5.6, 779 res per ton. In the consolidated results, it went from 1,850 to 841. So what's worse in our vision, when it comes to managing prices and margins, has already passed, which is the first month of the year where demand was not as it is now. And we're looking at a second semester that's going to be very positive with this maintenance and increase of prices. So sustainable resins, this is also another segment that had an evolution of 12% compared to the second semester of 2021 and 1.9 compared to the first quarter. Average prices evolved 16.3% and they dropped 9.6 in the first quarter from the first quarter to the second quarter. And now we're seeing a bit of a price adjustment in the international market. Resin and turpentine are commodities internationally. And here we also had a currency impact that reached 4.60 in a certain period last month, which also, of course, impacts the closing in the prices in real currency. So the average turpentine prices had a drop and 9% also from a quarterly perspective due to the same factor. So there is a bit of a price recovery in reais due to the dollar. But on the other hand, there's also an important impact in international prices that have been dropping differently than paper, where the dollar prices have been going up consistently over the last year. But the prices of rosin and turpentine have been having a dropping trend. So our debt ended at 1,100,000,000, 479,000,000 in cash and 619 of net debt, a leverage of 1.11, 96% in national currency, and this recent increase of the dollar actually contributes to exports because we have basically nothing in foreign currency. 89% is in long term and only 11% is short term. Our ROIC, as we mentioned, is on a growing curve, consolidating itself at this level of 25%, which is extremely high. But of course, not considering the returns that we started having with the investments we had at the Gaia platform, which gives us a lot of satisfaction, especially in the comparison with other companies in the sector, and also a vision with international companies. Our buyback program is already in last stretch. We've already bought 81.74% of the possible stock to be acquired in this buyback program. And we're always assessing the possibilities to, once we've completed this program, keep a buyback program because we understand the importance of defending the importance of our stock. And also mention to the market that our stock currently is not representing the intrinsic value of the company and the recent results and sustainable results that the company has had in the last quarters. And when it comes to the payment of dividends, we paid the second quarter of 2022 95,701. Here we have the dividends complemented and plus the dividends paid in regards to the first quarter of 2022. In the last 12 months, we paid 153 million in dividends, which represented 0.61 in reais, 6.62% dividend yield in a vision from the last 12 months with a trend of a growing trend considering the better results companies had in last quarter. So when we assess the Gaia platform, we have 9 projects that have already been approved by the board. And the 3 main projects that are under development are Gaia 1, 2, and 3, which are already at a pretty, they've already progressed a lot. And with the expansion of the packaging factory in Santa Catarina, we're already almost ready to start reaping the results of this investment. And we have some equipment also for factory automation that are going to be arriving soon, and we should be completing this by the end of this year, probably even before the end of this year. And the major equipment, like the cardboard corrugator and the new machine for boxes as well, which is Japanese, has already been installed. The physical expansion of the factory has also been completed. So we basically have this complete project for Gaia 2, and we're already starting to reap the fruits. Gaia 1, which is the main project, we have 47.5% of the physical expansion, and most of this is going to be complete by the end of this year. And in the beginning of next year, we'll be completing the other details of the investments and equipment, assembly, work, and learning curves as well in each of these fronts to be able to start working up the boiler in the first semester of next year. So in the next year, we're already having at least 50% of the year reaping the fruits of Gaia 1, with Gaia 2 complete and Gaia 3 also. We should be stopping the machine for rework in the month of September. So the 3 projects that are most significant in the Gaia platform are completed at most by 1 year. And these 2 we're going to be completing this semester still. So the repotentialization of the PCHs we are already licensing with a good chance of restarting this in San Luis in the next year. The project management system is also working well with all of our equipment, and the paper unit in Santa Catarina, and the ET expansion is also moving along. And so the automation of the intermediate stock has already been negotiated, and we are starting to manufacture the equipment. So here's a bit of the vision on the schedule. Gaia 1 is going to start off here in the first semester with a learning curve, and then after Gaia 3 will be completed in the second semester, and then you have a learning curve still with the new machine. So the repotentialization is foreseen for the next year, and the other Gaias that are lower values but are taking place within plans and within what was scheduled. So just to show you how we're in line with the circular economy model, we've recycled in the past 12 months 227,000 tons of paper, and we recycled 1,398 tons of plastic. We have a production plant for plastic recycling, which are the plastics that come together with paper scraps. In this quarter, we also received an award that made us very satisfied. We're among the best ESG companies in the Azami award, together with Clabine and Susana. These are 3 companies that received awards of some of the best companies in ESG this year, which demonstrates how we've gotten our best practices right and all our consistency in this area with sustainability, governance, and social initiatives the company's been working on. We launched an integrated report for 2021 covering many different areas and investments that the company works on. We worked on the first biannual waste event. We also supported the Projeto Zoom, and we also had the Sabe Distribuidor Arte, which is support for environmental education we work on in schools in the municipality of Vargem Bonita and Catanduvas that are really close to our production plant in Santa Catarina. We also support the Diversa Fair, which is the biggest LGBTQ plus employability fair in Latin America. We've been supporting these causes a lot in this diversity segment. And of course, we had a great honor in this quarter to complete our annual customer satisfaction research, and we had significant evolution with 82% NPS, which is the Net Promoter Score. And this is a measure that goes from -100 to +100, and 82 is considered as excellent. And so this is constant work we've been doing for many, many years, pricing adequately and valuing our offer. And this is something that's been very well noticed by our customers. We really have a market position. It's really different in our relationship with customers in different segments we operate with. So this is our IR team, Ojivam leading the team as the CFO and Investor Relations Director. Andres, our Investor Relations Director. And then we have our team in the day-to-day activities with Mariciani, Vincenzo, Daniela, and all the financial team. Also, Marcos, Emmanuel, Evandro, and Alex from the accounting area and the new business area, Giovanna Bucco. So all of them are available as well to work with our investors. So having said that, I think that's pretty much it. That's what we prepared as a presentation, and now we'll be available to answer any other questions you may have. Thank you, Sergio. Well, you can send the questions through the Q&A or raise your hand here on chat, but we have some questions in the Q&A, as I mentioned, and the first one is from Caio Grenner. How's it going, Caio? Good afternoon, everyone. Some questions. First, trying to get an update on the margin dynamic for the short term. And the first one is you could mention maybe a bit of how you're looking at the evolution of costs for the second semester. I believe that the prices for the scraps will keep in control. Do you understand that there will be a peak in the second quarter for the costs without the scraps or excluding the scraps? Well, hi, Caio. How's it going? Our vision is that the scraps should be a bit more pressured in these months and the next months, but we're not noticing a scenario that's in a higher growing trend because the reasons for that peak are not placed in the market at this moment. What we have is a bit of a warming of the demand due to some monetary stimulus and even the drop in unemployment, which has, of course, helped with greater consumption of corrugated cardboard in some of the traditional segments. Although e-commerce and the substitution of some materials for paper also take on an important role in the growth of the volumes in the sector from a short-term vision. But in the short term, we see the traditional segments reacting strongly. And with this, we should have a second semester that's really strong, but of course within a natural dynamic in the sector. The scraps, as we've seen in the second semester, have a bit of a growing trend or pressure, but we're not noticing anything that is way above 100 reais of what we're doing today in the next month. But of course, I can't state it would be this, but it would be something around this, so they can enter a natural trend of a drop, which is a typical cycle of the scrap. So we've seen a bit of pressure, which favors the replacement of prices over the semester. So on one side, we'll have some of a growing trend with scraps. On the other hand, we'll have an increase in price adjustments taking place in the packaging throughout the second semester, considering the bigger demand. So we've already seen this transfer of prices taking place in the market in a very timid manner, but it should take on a bit of speed from August or September onwards as volumes continue to be strong as they have been. So of course the other costs are pressured this year due to the inflation, but the personnel costs are quite high. You have the replacements as well, but we've already noticed a bit of a slowdown in the speed of this growth trend because of the inflation also taking on a few signs of maybe reaching a bit more of a controlled situation. And the second question is, you reported a revenue per ton and a dropping trend. What's the cause of this? Do you see that there's pressure for discounts among customers? Do you think this will happen in the second semester? Well, I think Lindomar could contribute with this, but it's really in line with what I mentioned before. There were a few price adjustments due to bids that we had throughout the second semester, and there was a bit of a drop in the sheet that was a stronger correlation. But generally speaking, the box customers, all of their prices maintained. But we also have the increases in Santa Catarina, which typically take place in major accounts that have lower average prices, but that have boxes that are more productive in our factories. So it doesn't mean that because there's a volume that's a bit bigger than average that we would have worse margins. Sometimes the margins are bigger due to the bigger volumes and the productivity that these volumes have in the factory. Linda, would you like to complement this? So thank you, Caio. There's not pressure for a drop in prices. Actually, it's the opposite. As you mentioned, actually, we've been restructuring ever since July. Um, and some things are happening in the month of August. Uh, but there's no pressure in price reductions. And this takes place considering the points I mentioned. So we also have the question from Elena from XP. Hi, how's it going, Elena? Her first question is about the scrap prices, considering that prices have been dropping, but they're still above historical prices. What are the trends you're looking at, and how are you considering that this will behave over time? Saju mentioned this a bit. And the second one is about the cost inflations. Uh, and what are you seeing this quarter, and what do you expect for the next period? And how do you see this impacting the projects in the Gaia platform? Well, let's get into this by parts. About the scraps, I think they're slightly above the historical prices, but not too much more when you work on the inflation the entire period, but not that much more. And the trend is that they'll keep up in this level um, with a bit of a pressure and a peak this month and the next month. But they won't reach the levels we've reached last year, the year before, which were a lot higher due to the pandemic and the structure for the collection system being very impacted by the pandemic and people staying home and the closings of the cooperatives. And this is not considered something that should happen in the second semester. So this growing trend pressure was pretty typical for a second semester in the market, but the cost pressure really depends on the inflation. We've felt a bit of this pressure in civil construction costs, equipment costs that will lead to some kind of an impact in the Gaia platform investments. But on the other hand, most of the investments like Gaia 2 were done last year, so they've already performed all of the investments. In Gaia 1, we performed many negotiations throughout last year, and we were able to keep prices in most of the packages. And there's a bit of the pressure from the inflation, especially those packages that are being negotiated now, as well as civil construction has been impacted by COVID in the beginning of the year and delayed, of course, some different fronts that are already being recovered. So generally speaking, we've been able to keep projects within the original budgets with some kind of inflation impact, which is natural, but nothing that would in some way impact the returns in the projects. Because over time, there was also the price replacement that was way above inflation. So when you talk about the returns, even though you have some kind of an impact in the value of the projects, the returns have been better than the original ones because we've been able to replace transfer prices for paper and virgin fiber at a bigger speed than what we had as inflation in that period. So Hiki is the director for paper and forestry projects, but he's also responsible for the Gaia 1 project. And so I think you mentioned that very well. We've already negotiated many of these packages. And the project's doing very well. And I have nothing else to add. But that does not mean we won't have an impact in the value of the projects at the end. Some kind of an impact will exist, but we've been monitoring this so that the returns can get better over time. So just the labor issue and the percentage of the adjustments that have been around 11 or 12%. Since it's a project we started way back then, we're now paying for this labor. So it'll have a bit of impact, but nothing that will compromise the returns on the project. And just to add on to this, our sector for packaging is considered to be a sector that has the capacity to transfer the inflation. So naturally protects this because of its capacity to really increase prices over time during the period, and with this protect margins. So it's a sector that in this point is maybe a little less impacted um, because inflation also makes the cost of credit a little more expensive. But these are some other factors that don't affect our sector that much. So it's really resilient in our dynamic. We have another question from Victor also. Victor, how's it going? Good morning. Congratulations on the results. I have two questions. When you perform the adjustment on the valorization of the biological assets and the cash generated, wouldn't it make sense to exclude from the adjustment the non-cash costs that are also used in the CPV? This point I can answer. Actually, Victor's referring to the line for the fair value of the biological asset, which is way at the bottom of the CPV in the income statement that recognizes the valorization of the forest with the increase of prices, which is a recurring item for companies that own forests, but it's a non-cash effect, and we adjusted that in the EBITDA. On the other hand, at the CPV, we also have the exhaustion, which is also considering market value, and we have the non-cash effect. So actually, by what I understood from Victor's question, it would be if you could maybe mention what is the fair value and what is exhaustion. When you consider the accounting rules, you have to use separate lines. If not, that's going to be inside the CPV. And the variation for the fair value would be one line below. But both are for EBITDA calculation purposes. They're adjusted because they don't have cash effects with exhaustion and the variation of the fair value. Okay. I hope to have answered your question, Victor. Let me know. But the adjustments are made for exhaustion and in the asset. And the second question is, a lot of analysts treat pulp and paper with assumptions that are similar to commodities overall. What's your vision on this? Do you expect a significant drop in prices for 2023? No, our products are not commodities, and we produce brown pulp that's integrated in our production process for paper. And our papers in the market, those 25,000 tons I referred to that were sold this quarter, are papers that we sell to many different segments. And these segments have average sizes. So we operate in the bakery sector for bags, plastic bags, and paper bags, sorry. And in all these segments we operate, we're market leaders, and we have this value perception in our offer that's a lot higher than that of our competitors due to the relationship we have with our customers, as well as the integration we have in different areas with customer areas as well. And so this ends up making us have a win-win scenario that's very strong. Since we work with small and medium-sized converters, we have this positioning of selling to small and medium-sized converters. These are customers that buy from us regularly. And this is really what guarantees these gains in the values. The segment that's so strong, there's very positive perception, and customers compensate us regularly for this. It's so in the past periods, due to a bigger search for paper and papers becoming a substitution for other materials, and it's quite exceptional because it's biodegradable. There's a high percentage of recycling in Brazil. So paper is gaining even more significance, and we are expanding our capacity and all the adjustments as well with the expansion of pulp and machine too, to be able to work in this segment as it's growing so robustly. And just to add on here, actually the price of corrugated cardboard, you can see on the graphs that it's really not related to commodity prices in any way. Commodity prices typically have ups and downs, there's cycles, but corrugated cardboard is really like a straight and growing trend. So just look at the paper prices and you'll see the dynamics. The prices of corrugated cardboard don't drop. They've always been growing stably over time. So the dynamics are totally different. It's not dollarized. It's not considering international commodities. Our product is customized and each box is a different project. It takes a while to be deployed and approved. With customers, there's a cost and price specific, so the dynamics are totally different. And it's the same thing as paper. Our paper is niche paper, so it's not traded at a worldwide level. We still got many questions up ahead. So Gustavo Volpato, good morning. First of all, thank you for the results. I have two questions. One is about the market share that the company has in the overall corrugated cardboard market. What's the market share today? Was there growth in the market share? The second question is about the share participation of the management in the results in this quarter that it reached 11 million. Why is there such a growth in the annual comparison? And should this expense also exist in the third quarter? Well, do you want to start talking about this with the share and stake of the management and administrators? Our bylaws foresee that 10% of the profits can be intended to have share in incentives for administrators and management limited to a global annual compensation. This happened in the first quarter at a higher value. The global annual compensation expected for management that is in the reference form is about 13 million reais for 2022. So we can just complement up to 13 million, which would be the expected amount. So it's not going to be repeated in the second quarter or in the third or fourth quarters because we've already reached our limit. Yeah, there'll be a complement now in the second quarter to be able to reach this limit. And this provision is not a cash provision and it's not a disbursement, but it provides some kind of a buffer where you're going to be launching the stock option for management, which is this program that's connected to performance in the company and other value generation indicators for shareholders, which in our case is going to be paid in cash. It's not paid with typical stock options. And this provision is then creating this kind of buffer where as time goes by and you fulfill those periods for the vesting period, then you have this kind of payment to the management within the provisions that are in the balance sheet. So it's limited to the annual expected compensation. So it's not going to be repeated in the third quarter. It's just a complement, an additional amount. It's not going to be repeated in the fourth quarter either. So just to answer about market share, our market share is 4.10%, and it's been growing consistently ever since January. It was 373, and the trend is that it'll continue to evolve because we have investments in Gaia 2, and so the trend is that it'll continue to advance as well in line with market growth. Perfect. And now I will open up. We have two questions in the chat, and I see Rodrigo first. Rodrigo, your mic is open. You can speak. Rodrigo, I think you need to accept so that you can hear the so that you can open up your mic and answer the question. I've asked him to unmute his microphone so that he can accept this. Hello, João. Hi, João. How's it going? Well, I will answer the other questions and after we'll see if we're able to speak to them. So, Luisa Cruz, hi, congratulations on the results. Could you give us a little more color on the competitive scenario in the market and what are the expectations for the entry of new volumes on behalf of Irani and competitors for paper and for cardboard? anyone could answer this one? Ehiki. Could you give us a little more information on the competitive scenario in the market, as well as expectations for the entry of new volumes on behalf of Iranian competitors for paper and cardboard? Actually, we have, of course, after a cycle of very positive results and a growing market on an average of 4% per year in the past years, of course, companies are excited for investments. So we have expansions that are small for capacity that are taking place among the main producers with new conversion machines, some kind of a unbottlenecking of the factories. And we also have some other investments announced, which was the case of the Figuera project in Klabin, which adds about 100,000 tons. There's 240,000 tons plus another 140,000 tons, which are substitution of current factories that are maybe less efficient, and 100,000 additional tons. And we also have the Trombini factory in the south. But now if we were to look at these volumes that were added, they can kind of handle the growth in the market for 1 year. So we're not noticing capacity pressure. The volumes in the south, for example, are growing volumes because of the dynamic with the animal protein factories that tends to be even more positive in the next years. It's a cluster there of animal protein companies, and this favors us. And of course, we've expanded our capacity. Gobain's been working on that as well, but nothing that can keep us awake at night. These are natural expansions in the overall growth process. The sector grows considering the economic dynamic as a whole. There's a strong connection with the GDP, but it's growing also considering e-commerce that uses a big amount of corrugated cardboard, even more than traditional retail. And so it continues to grow, considering despite what happened in the price dynamic, but it's still growing at 2 double digits. And the forecast for the next years is really going to help the sector, and also the material substitutions, which are really strong, and they've been going on in Brazil, with paper taking on a very strong protagonism in this substitution process, entering niches it hadn't been in before. We've been starting to work in other segments for other materials, paper for Q-tips and other products, where paper starts becoming a substitute that's more sustainable instead of plastics and other materials. So besides the normal demand that already existed, there's an increase in demand coming through e-commerce and the material substitutions. So this, of course, keeps in the sector pretty heated, and the capacities that come in help to handle this new demand. And another important point to mention here, which is probably the most important besides the capacity for corrugated cardboard, is the capacity for paper, because we had an increase in our relevant paper capacity with a new clubbing machine, but that's more focused on exports than an internal market, and it has not been pressuring the paper market at the moment. And well, in the chat, there's a link also about our investment thesis, which has more information on all these secular trends for the substitution of plastics and paper, all of the issues with renewable energy, e-commerce, delivery, food, which is mostly where our exposure comes from, packaging for food and animal protein. So all of this is in our thesis for investments that was posted here in the chat. So the next one is it's from Alexandre Sali. Congratulations on this. I would like to have you answer a bit of your perspective on operational expenses. And well, actually, the impacts of the inflation are quite relevant. So when you look at the expenses with sales, we have the biggest impact coming from freight, markets because they are impacted by the fuel cost increases and also the international freight cost increases, which were absurd. And most of these were able to transfer into the prices, especially in the paper business. There was an increase in the dollar prices and the papers to replace these expenses, but when we see Ralston and turpentine, we were not able to transfer these increases. So this is the main reason why fuel and international freights and the expenses with sales. So in administrative expenses, they're always around 5% of the revenue. So this is a level that is really utilized. We're very much concerned with SG&A and keeping these under control with the management of the resources and structures. But 5% would be something that's really well positioned in regards to the benchmarks we have with companies and in the same size or level of development. And when you compare this with the big ones and you look at the percentage of expenses for big companies that are publicly held, we have this percentage that's quite healthy. But of course, this is strongly impacted by inflation in the period. So we have many different questions. I'm going to try to go through this quickly. But I'm going to pass this on to Rodrigo and I'll ask him to open up his mic. Rodrigo, can you speak? Seems Rodrigo's having a problem with his sound. So meanwhile, I'll continue here. We have more questions from Alexandre Sade. So if Gaia is complete, is there a trend forecastable in the EBITDA margins and the ROIC? Thank you very much. Oh, well, here, this phase in the Gaia platform, we do expect an increase in EBITDA. It's really focused on competitive gains for the production of energy and paper and pulp in the current machines. And so the returns are really coming in from the expansion in the EBITDA margins. But with this, yes, we do expect an improvement in the ROIC. But I want to remind you that our ROIC is really high, so it's about 25.5% today. And it's already reflecting exceptional performance considering that the cost of capital in the company is a lot lower than this. So yes, we do expect some kind of an improvement in the ROIC after these investments because the company will be deleveraged very quickly. Even with these investments, we'll keep at most 2 times throughout the cycle, and that will be quickly deleveraged. So the ROIC tends to be quite high in the next years. And then the next one is if you could give us some information on the timing and movements geared towards expansion projects for more production. We are already working on this from a conceptual perspective in a new cycle of investments. We still don't have a design for this. We've been discussing alternatives, but it's something that we're conceiving for the next cycle of investments. Within the Gaia platform, we also have some projects that we can assess and consider what would be the best returns and best projects for machine 7, for example, for the Resin factory as well, and possibly some renovation in the current machines. But the Gaia concept is really addressing all of the competitive issues and investments in the current platform in the company. In the next cycle will be a whole new set of projects geared to the expansion of productivity and capacity, other regions, an increase in pulp production, paper production, and corrugated cardboard production. This is our focus for the next investment cycle. We should be conceiving and preparing this cycle by the end of this year, and we'll be disclosing this to the market probably in mid next year. Of course, this needs to be approved by the board. Gustavo Pazos, good afternoon. Considering the investments in Gaia platform, Irani should be ending the year with a net debt EBITDA ratio at what level, considering company estimates? We should be close to about 2 times EBITDA. We still do not have the final forecast. There's a lot going on and many variables in the next month, but we do imagine we'll be below 2 times net debt to EBITDA. Danielle Gouveia, could you talk about the investments announced by Klabin and the new capacity for corrugated cardboard and paper? Are you competitors? Are you in the main regions as Irani's competition? How to compare investments of 1.57 billion in Klabin for a net addition in the capacity of only 100,000 tons, with a value Irani of about 2.2 billion, with a total capacity for 565,000 tons of capacity. 325 paper for packaging and plus 225 for cardboard and 16 for resins. Well, we don't really, we can't really criticize the project specifically because we don't know about all of the details and if there's a paper capacity they want to convert into corrugated cardboard, but it's definitely an important project for the sector with high technology, cutting edge technology, a corrugated cardboard unit, but it's in a region where most of the big sector players are present, which is the region close to Campinas, with a radius of about 100 kilometers from Campinas, where you have basically all of the big companies with operations there, and there in that region, the biggest consumption is the state of São Paulo, with 55% of the demand for corrugated cardboard. So it's really important, it's additional capacity to be able to meet the needs of this growing demand in the region, and we haven't seen the Klabin increase in productivity and capacity as something that will keep us awake at night, because Klabin has a very adequate price management posture approach when it comes to market management and value generation, just as we have. So this makes the market, of course, be even more competitive, but also be more organized with companies that are always getting better and better. So it's always very positive to have an investment in capacity and technology on behalf of our competitors. We have one more from Jose Oliveira. Hi, Jose. Do you plan to export other products besides the Rosins? Well, we do export paper, and about 30% of the paper we produce in the machines for virgin fiber, machines 1, 2, and 4, we export to a big amount of customers in the foreign customers that are traditional and that buy in a recurring manner. We have customers that have been buying from us regularly for 40 years abroad. So anyways, we've already exported a lot, and there's always this possibility to export even more once the internal market is not so favorable, which is something that's also present when we consider sustainability management. Sometimes exporting has better margins than the internal market. Sometimes the internal market is kind of slow and we can export a bigger amount. So this kind of gauge helps us to manage sustainability overall in the business. So corrugated cardboard and paper is not exported normally. They normally have products inside, so the box itself is quite light. So the freight costs would make the product unfeasible economically. So then we have a final comment from Alexandre about he can understand the lack of interest in the market upon the company. It's a structural business with excellent management and margins and spectacular returns. ESG, congratulations. I don't think there's a lack of interest in the market. There's a big interest actually in the market. Stock in Irani compared to the market had exceptional performance, but it's always a matter which demonstrates a stronger concern in the market and the consistency in the results. But this is a process we've been working on, and so that we can become more well-known and deliver greater value to our shareholders. Well, that's pretty much it. We've covered everything. And we want to thank you all for your presence here today. And of course, we're available. If you want to clarify any other points, you can send us an email in our IR department. We'll have our team available. It's going to be a pleasure to answer all of you. And why don't you buy our stock? You'll make a lot of money. Hey, everyone. Have a great day. Bye. Take care. See you. Bye-bye. Thanks, guys. Take care.